The funding for this program is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Friends of 4, 10, and 12.
Tonight, live from the State Capitol building in Boise, Governor John Evans presents his annual budget message. Good evening. Idaho Governor John Evans makes tonight what is perhaps his major political speech of the year, the blueprint for how he would like to see the state spend its money for the next fiscal year. This is typically a speech awaited with anticipation by the members of the Idaho legislature, and for that matter, everyone else who's concerned about how the state spends its money and where that money comes from. The major thrust of the governor's speech tonight is expected to be funding for both public and higher education. So now, live from the executive offices on the second floor of the State Capitol building in Boise, the Governor of Idaho, the Honorable John V. Evans.
Good evening. A year ago at this time, Idaho was in the midst of a budget crisis. Due to the severity of the national recession, state revenues were well below the levels that had been anticipated. In order to maintain a balanced budget, we were forced to curtail numerous state programs, eliminate jobs for some of our state employees, and cut back the work hours of those that remained. Tonight, I am pleased to report to you that our recovery from the recession is continuing. Unemployment is down 3 percentage points from what it was a year ago, and other economic indicators are positive. The most important news tonight is that we will have enough adequate revenues to meet all of our obligations for the current year. In addition, we are predicting an end-of-the-year surplus of some $22 million. This is a much different picture than we had a year ago. It reflects a substantial improvement in our economy and indicates we have been successful in addressing our state's financial problems. Idaho's economy and the state's budget are closely intertwined. Idaho citizens, individual and corporate, rely on essential government services in their personal lives and also in their businesses and industries. On the other hand, a healthy economy generates the revenues to finance a quality educational system and other government services. The primary goal of the budget I'm presenting to you tonight is to provide adequate funding for those programs and services essential for economic growth in Idaho. I am recommending a state general fund budget of $560 million for fiscal year 1985. This budget does not require an increase in taxes above the present rates, nor does it require any new taxes, but it is a budget that will allow us to fund the basic needs of state and local government. The funding of education is the major responsibility of state government, and it is the highest priority of my budget. Nearly 3/4 of my budget is earmarked for education. A high-quality educational system is the cornerstone of Idaho's future. The link between education and economic growth has been verified in study after study. In order to compete with foreign countries and other states for a larger share of the marketplace, we must be willing to make a substantial investment, an investment in a quality educational system that will ensure the future prosperity of our state. In addressing the education portion of my budget, let's look first at our public school support program. The Idaho Commission on Excellence in Education released its support in August of 1982. This report provides a blueprint for improvement in education in Idaho. I would also like to commend the efforts of the legislature in studying the needs of public education. The legislature's Public Education Reform Committee, in their report just last week, has made a number of recommendations which could significantly improve our quality of education. Last summer, I created a task force on education and charged them with first examining the Idaho Commission on Excellence report and some other recent reports on education, and then ask them to set priorities and to place a cost estimate on the recommendations that they endorsed. The task force reported that although there are many serious needs in public schools, there is none more pressing than our need to improve teacher salaries. Idaho ranks 39th in the nation in average teacher salaries. Even more significantly, Idaho's salaries are more than $4,000 below the average salary paid to teachers in the 6 states bordering Idaho. This has led to a continued loss of experienced Idaho teachers to our neighboring states. It also presents great difficulties for Idaho when we must compete with those same states to recruit new teachers. I am recommending an additional $37 million to begin closing the salary equity gap that exists between Idaho and our neighboring states. This amount will allow us to reduce that gap by 75%. I'm also recommending a 5% cost of living increase for all public school employees. Teachers are, of course, the core of our public school system, but there are other important elements that also require increased funding. My budget includes a 5% increase for school supplies and other operating expenses. I'm also calling for a 10% increase for capital outlay items such as books and equipment, and as well as $1 million for computer equipment. I'm also recommending additional funding for the State Department of Education. This funding will enable the department to implement proposals that have been recommended by the State Commission on Excellence in Education. This includes the development of new curriculum course guides and a statewide achievement testing program at the 11th grade level. I am recommending 7 new positions for the Department of Education. These include 1 position to assist public school districts in developing and strengthening both the remedial and the developmental reading programs, and another position to develop and improve foreign language programs. Idaho's colleges and universities hold the key to much of our future development. Their role in providing the necessary education for many of our citizens who are entering the job market cannot be overemphasized. They also provide continuing opportunity for many workers to upgrade their skills and enhance their potential capabilities. As with public schools, the key to excellence in higher education is the faculty. Over the last 4 years, we have been working to improve faculty salaries. However, an equity gap still exists, and we're continuing to lose our outstanding people to universities in other states. In order to attract and retain quality faculty members at our institutions, I am recommending $1.4 million for salary equity for our college and university faculty. This will allow us to meet 75% of that salary disparity that exists between faculty in Idaho and those in other western states. I'm also recommending a 5% cost of living increase for all employees of our colleges and universities. Higher education suffered a serious setback last year when $8 million, which previously had been appropriated, was held back because of revenue shortfalls. The Board of Examiners did restore $2 million at my request, but we still need to restore the other $1 million. For that reason, I am requesting a $1 million supplemental appropriation to further restore the held back funds. In recent years, our college and university libraries have experienced serious erosion in both materials and staff positions. I am asking for funds to provide the libraries with needed books and materials, as well as to partially meet their staffing requirements. Equipment inventories at our institutions are also seriously deficient. We have been unable to keep up with the changes in technology and in replacement of equipment. I am recommending funding to replace the outmoded and worn-out equipment and to purchase new high-technology equipment that is so important in preparing our students for today's world. Research also is a vital function of our higher education institutions. Much of Idaho's economy, particularly our major industries of farming and forest products, is dependent upon the research performed at our colleges and universities. I am recommending that we increase our funding for both agricultural and forestry research. This will enable us to improve efficiency in production, expand our marketing activities, and develop new crop varieties and product lines. Vocational education also performs an essential service in addressing the need for skilled and technically trained workers for Idaho's industry. To better assist our vocational education system to meet those needs, I am supporting the expansion of training in skills which continue to be in high demand. In addition, I'm also supporting retraining programs for persons who have been displaced from their jobs due to plant closings or permanent reductions in force. I have also requested $1.3 million for salary equity for our vocational education instructors. In addition to education, training, and research, state government provides many other services that assist in the development and expansion of business in Idaho. To better utilize and coordinate our efforts to attract and retain business and industry, my Council on Economy and Government Organization has recommended the establishment of a State Department of Commerce. I concur with their recommendation. I will submit legislation creating such a department. The core of this new department will be the existing Division of Economic and Community Affairs, which is presently located within my office. By moving this division from my office and granting it the status of an independent department, we will place greater emphasis on economic development activities. The department will be able to develop and operate programs to expand and enhance our existing Idaho industries, as well as to attract new business and industry to our state. It will also work to develop more markets for Idaho's products, our goods, and our services. Most of our surrounding states spend 3 to 4 times as much as Idaho in funding economic development activities. With the establishment of this new department and adequate funding for its operation, we can significantly improve our ability to compete with our surrounding states for new business and jobs for Idahoans. One of the key factors in the competition for new business and industry is the ability of cities and counties to provide various local services. Police and fire protection, water and sewer systems, streets and roads, and other services are fundamental to both economic growth and quality of life. All too often, local officials have found themselves unable to meet local needs because of revenue limitations imposed upon them at the state level. If these limitations are not removed or modified, then the state must provide greater assistance to local governments. Once again, I am proposing that 1/2 cent of the state sales tax be earmarked for our cities and counties. These local governments presently receive some sales tax money. By increasing that share to 1/2 cent, we can assist local governments in their effort to deliver those essential services. Natural resources are the foundation of Idaho's economy. Our major industries of agriculture, forestry, mining, and recreation can either prosper or perish depending upon the management of all those natural resources. As stewards of our land, our air, and our water, we must develop and manage these resources in such a way as to ensure their continued availability for future generations. There is probably no environmental issue that is more important than protecting the quality of our water. Any decline in water quality would affect every citizen and every industry. Hazardous wastes present one of the greatest threats to water quality. The current situation at the EnviroSafe site in Grandview illustrates the complexity of this problem. I am proposing expansion of the state's program for monitoring solid and hazardous waste disposal. This will greatly improve our ability to continually check on waste disposal programs throughout the state, which could pose a threat to the environment and to the health and safety of our citizens. To offset some of the cost of our hazardous waste program, I am proposing a hazardous waste tax. This tax would be paid by the operators of the commercial waste sites on the revenues they derive from the commercial treatment, storage, handling, and disposal of those hazardous wastes. Half of the money would be planned to go to counties and half to the state for monitoring purposes. I'm also supporting increased funding to assist in the construction of local sewage treatment facilities. This important program helps local governments hold down their taxes and fees that go toward constructing sewage treatment systems. In many of our small communities, this construction of such projects would be impossible without this assistance from the state. Another important water quality issue is the administration of our Stream Channel Protection Act. This act assists in protecting the quality of water for domestic and commercial use. It also serves as our major means of ensuring the continuation of spawning grounds for the fish in our streams. I am supporting additional resources to aid in the administration of this act so we can protect the quality of our streams. One of the biggest water-related problems we have faced in many years is the controversy surrounding the Swan Falls water rights issue. In order to expedite a solution to this problem, I'm asking for an increase of $760,000 in general account funding for the Department of Water Resources. This will allow the department to seek solutions to this problem that affects the use and development of our water resources. I'm also requesting additional expertise to assist water users in rehabilitating and constructing water development projects. This, coupled with additional hydrologists to respond to the problems in local groundwater, will greatly improve our ability to ensure the continued efficient use of our water resources. Another natural resource issue is effective management of our state-owned lands. Revenues derived from these lands are an important part of our program for financing education. I am recommending funding for 2 additional foresters and 2 additional mineral resource specialists to improve both the management and the financial yields of our state-owned lands. In addition to providing for the education of our children and assisting in economic development, state government has another major responsibility. There are still many among us who cannot provide for their own basic needs. In striving to achieve prosperity in our state and a high quality of life for ourselves and for our children, we must be willing to assist and protect those of our fellow citizens who need our help. I'm asking for additional funds to continue the construction of a new psychiatric treatment unit at Hospital South in Blackfoot, and to continue preparation for the construction of a new 48-bed residential facility at the State School and Hospital in Nampa. Also, I'm proposing that we establish a 14-bed community facility to house the mentally ill and retarded persons who are not eligible for long-term residential care at our existing institutions. And to improve the daily living skills of some disabled adults, I am recommending that we begin activity programs in each of our adult development centers throughout the state. These programs provide skills for those who are unemployed because of age or disability. It is also most important that we consider the needs of young persons who are emotionally disturbed. I am recommending increased emphasis on social service and mental health programs for the emotionally disturbed children who do not require institutional settings. I'm also supporting the development of a juvenile diagnostic unit at Hospital South, similar to the one already in operation at Orofino. We have begun the construction of a new serious juvenile offender unit at the Youth Service Center in St. Anthony, and I'm requesting funds necessary to staff that unit once it's completed this next year. Alcohol abuse is another problem we cannot ignore. It impacts nearly every part of our society, every home, every family. I'm recommending the establishment of an alcohol awareness program in the Department of Law Enforcement. This program will be used to coordinate alcohol awareness services for use by state agencies in working with families and students, employers and workers. Our Office on Aging provides one of the state's most important services. In addition to a continuation of existing services, I am once again proposing an increase in funding for in-home care services. This program allows the elderly to remain in their own homes, and it results in a considerable savings in state funds that would otherwise be spent for nursing home care. I am proposing that all state employees also be granted a 5% cost of living increase effective July the 1st. For most, this will be their first increase in nearly 2 years. I'm also proposing that departments be given an additional amount equal to 2% of their salaries to use for discretionary pay, purposes such as a merit pay plan. Most of my budget is aimed at meeting needs that are critical to Idaho's future economic growth. As I stated earlier, this budget can be funded without any increase in existing taxes or any new general fund taxes. It will, however, require that the level of funding achieved by all of our existing taxes, including the sales tax, be maintained. The 4.5-cent sales tax would be sufficient to fund this budget. However, there are other possibly better alternatives that should or could be considered. We need to consider modifying or eliminating many of the tax exemptions that have been granted in past years. We should also consider the possibility of extending the sales tax to include a number of services which are presently exempt. By doing this, it would be possible to lower the sales tax below its present rate and still generate revenue sufficient to fund all of the items in my executive budget. We should also consider reducing the impact of the sales tax on groceries. This can be done by increasing the present income tax credit for groceries, which would be of particular benefit to our elderly and low-income citizens. Idaho's per capita tax is the lowest in the Rocky Mountain region and the 7th lowest in the entire nation. We can meet all of the priorities I've included in my budget and not increase taxes above their present level. Although our budget needs are great, we must also consider the benefits that we will receive from these programs. Time after time, parents have told me they want Idaho to be the kind of place where their children can have both a prosperous future and a good quality of life. The budget I have presented tonight will help to make Idaho that kind of place. Thank you. Best wishes for a Merry Christmas and a prosperous and happy New Year. Good night.
Idaho Governor John Evans presenting his annual budget speech tonight, the speech originating live from the executive offices in the state capitol building here in Boise. In case you joined us a little late, here's a brief recap of the major points in the governor's budget speech tonight. The governor's total fiscal year 1985 budget is placed at $560 million. That would be a 23% increase over the current year. The governor projects next year's revenue in a couple of ways. This figure, $461 million, is the estimate should the temporary sales tax increase of 1.5 cents be removed as scheduled next year. Add to that a carryover surplus of $18 million from the current fiscal year, the total comes to $479 million, leaving, again using Evans's figures, an $81 million state deficit. To prevent that deficit, the governor proposes several alternatives. One, of course, keeping the entire 4.5 cent sales tax. Another, to set the sales tax at 3.5 or 4 cents and then make one or a number of tax changes, including sales taxes on services or utility bills, changes or repeals of sales tax exemptions, addition of some new income tax brackets, and possibly a minimum corporate income tax. Evans's major budget increases come in the public school area, including a 5% cost of living increase for all public school employees and a 17.4% salary hike to push Idaho classroom teacher salaries closer to the regional average. Total public school request, $272 million. That's up by over 26% from this year's $215 million budget. A 5% cost of living increase is also proposed for all higher education employees, plus a 6.8% salary equity raise for faculty, deans, and department heads. The total higher education proposal, $84 million. Evans wants to dedicate a half-cent of the sales tax to local governments. That would cost over $14 million. And the governor wants to give state employees a 5% raise, plus provide some money for merit increases. Total cost of that, $10.5 million. It's likely the headlines tomorrow morning will read that this was a record-breaking budget request for Governor Evans, the first budget proposed by an Idaho chief executive to top the $500 million mark. The governor emphasizing, of course, that it can be done without increasing any taxes. The taxes in place right now can do the job. Major emphasis tonight on education, the governor devoting about half of his time to that, intent, as are Republican leaders of the legislature, to make education the primary issue when the legislature convenes on January 9th. The major thrust of the message, of course, an improvement in teacher salaries. My colleague Gene McNeil sat in on a briefing this morning on the details of this budget. Gene, I think it's probably safe to say that a lot of lawmakers will find the bottom line in this budget pretty hard to digest.
I think it will. I think there was a certain amount of surprise among the reporters at that briefing this morning, most of whom had expected it to be somewhat lower, maybe by $10 million or so. Yeah, I think there'll be a lot of immediate distaste for the bottom line, and I certainly doubt that the budget would ever end up at that 560 or really even close to it. But I also think that there's going to be a real steamroller in the public school teacher salary equity area. I think we've already seen, obviously, as the governor mentioned, the legislative committee making some recommendations in the same area. The Republican Central Committee this summer made some recommendations. That, I think, is something that the legislature is going to have to buy, at least in good part.
In fact, a group of conservative Republicans have called a news conference tomorrow to voice some concerns already about this budget,
yes,
well in advance of the legislative session beginning.
Yes.
I guess we should just mention quickly that the only major new initiative announced tonight was the creation of a State Department of Commerce to be built around the existing Division of Economic and Community Affairs. We'll have some further reaction to the governor's budget speech on Idaho Reports here tomorrow night, 6:30. I'm Mark Johnson. Thank you for joining us. Good night.
The funding for this program is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Friends of 4, 10, and 12.